Hello, it's Dr. Kevin Sansberry. Welcome back. Today, we're going to discuss the difference between a hostile work environment and a toxic work environment. So many people often use these terms interchangeably, but they do have a difference. And we're going to be exploring these differences and also share with you some tips on what employees can do if they're in similar situations.
Meet Layla, a bright and talented young professional who had been working for a reputable company for over a year. Layla was passionate about her job and had big dreams of moving up the ladder. Her dreams of a successful career was cut short by the work environment she found herself in. Layla wanted to feel valued and respected in her workplace. She wanted to work in a supportive environment that fostered growth and development. Despite her best efforts, Layla's colleagues and superiors constantly belittled her, dismissed her ideas, and made her feel like an outsider. Her attempts to voice her concerns and request support were ignored or met with hostility. Layla tried to address the situation by speaking to her superiors in human resources. She was told that her concerns were unfounded and that she needed to work harder to fit in. She also tried to find allies within her company, but found that most of her colleagues were either indifferent or afraid to speak out. Unfortunately, the measures that Layla took did not yield any positive results. Her superiors in human resources were unable to acknowledge the problem. Layla's frustration and stress levels continued to rise, affecting her mental and physical health. In the end, Layla decided to leave the company and start fresh somewhere else. It was a difficult decision, but it was the best one for her mental and physical health. Through her experience, Layla learned that her well-being and mental health should come first and that it's okay to walk away.
So as you listen to that story, was that a hostile work environment or a toxic work environment? Let's compare and contrast. So a hostile work environment is described as discriminatory behavior towards groups based on race, gender, religion, things like that. Those are called protected classes. This behavior has to be severe and pervasive, making employees feel unsafe and uncomfortable at work. This can lead to legal consequences if not addressed by the company. So in contrast, a toxic work environment is a negative work atmosphere that affects everyone, or mostly everyone, regardless of their individual characteristics such as race, gender, religion, and other protected classes. Now, this behavior is not necessarily discriminatory by legal definition. However, it can be hostile, just not the hostile work environment definition. It can lead to high levels of stress, anxiety, and burnout among employees. So if you guessed correctly, Layla's story describes a toxic work environment. So what can you do if you find yourself in a hostile work environment or a toxic work environment? I'm going to give you two different approaches or routes. This is just a YouTube video. This is not legal advice, but I wanted to give you things to think about. So let's start with what can I do in a hostile work environment? First off, document the harassment and discriminating behavior. You should document any incidents of harassment or discrimination, including dates, times, locations, and the names of anyone involved. Second, it would also be important to report the harassment through the organization's official reporting channels. You could have a ethics hotline, you could report to your supervisor, you could report to a human resources representative. Whatever your mechanisms are in the workplace, utilize those mechanisms. If the harasser is the supervisor, the employee should definitely report it to someone higher up in the company or to human resources. Third, employees have options to file a complaint with the EEOC, which is the Equal Opportunity Commission. Especially if the employer doesn't take action to address the harassment or discriminatory behavior, the employee could file a complaint with the EEOC, which is a federal agency responsible for anti-discrimination laws. And lastly, employees have the option to seek legal counsel. So if Layla were in this situation, she could consult with a lawyer to determine if she has a legal claim for harassment or discrimination. So it's important to note that specific actions that an employee can take will depend on the context of the situation and various circumstances. All in all, it's always best to seek out advice from an employment attorney or other legal professional. So let's talk about what an employee can do in a toxic work environment. So as I described that situation, I left no indication in the story that Layla was experiencing any harassment or discrimination as defined by the hostile work environment. So what you're going to hear are some tips, but do know that some of these tips may be utilized in the hostile work environment example as well. So in a toxic work environment, you want to first try to establish boundaries to protect yourself from the negative behavior. This can include setting limits on the amount of time you spend at work. This could be avoiding individuals who are engaging in these behaviors. It's also important to lift up that just like a hostile work environment, in a toxic work environment, seeking support and reporting whatever that behavior is to your supervisor and to human resources is an option. But we'll get to human resources in a second. You also, in a toxic work environment, which is also applies for hostile, seeking support from colleagues or friends outside of work. There could be folks in other departments even who know what you're going through, who might have some tips within how to thrive in that organizational culture. Thirdly, it's always good to seek support of a counselor or a therapist. This could be your own psychologist, and this can also be your organization's EAP, which is your employee assistance program. Ultimately, they can provide tools and techniques to help you manage your emotions and stress levels. Let's talk about human resources. Human resources, or HR for short, is responsible for managing that employer-employee relationship and ensuring compliance with relevant laws, policies, procedures. In the case of a hostile work environment or a toxic work environment, HR can play an important role in addressing the issues and helping employees feel safe and supported. Here's what HR can do. HR can investigate complaints. So HR is responsible for investigating complaints of harassment, discrimination, and any form of misconduct. So whether or not you're meeting that threshold of a hostile work environment, HR is responsible for the organizational culture, and most likely they'll be doing an investigation related to whatever claims that are brought to them. This may involve interviewing witnesses, reviewing evidence, and making recommendations to management about how to address the situation. HR can also provide guidance and support. So this guidance and support may include explaining company policies and procedures, connecting employees with resources such as counseling services, legal services, the employee assistance program like I shared, and providing leadership training and other training like conflict resolution. HR can take action to address the issues. So if human resources finds that, there is a toxic work environment, there is a hostile work environment, they may recommend and implement actions to address the issue. This could include disciplinary action for employees who are engaged in misconduct. It can include changes to the company policies and practices, procedures. And again, like I said before, it can include providing additional training or providing resources to help employees understand and prevent such behaviors. Now, here's what HR can't do. HR cannot guarantee confidentiality. While HR can take steps to protect employees' privacy and confidentiality, they can't guarantee that information shared with them during an investigation will not be disclosed to others in the need to know. And in some cases, HR may be required to provide certain information to government agencies or other parties. HR cannot provide legal advice. While HR can provide guidance and support to employees as I described, they cannot provide legal advice or representation. So again, if you need legal assistance, you may need to seek out help from external counsel. HR cannot guarantee outcomes. While HR can take steps to address a hostile or toxic work environment, they can't guarantee specific outcomes or results. Ultimately, it's up to the employer to decide what actions to take, and many issues do take time to resolve. There's a stigma related to human resources, and here's some things to keep in mind in full transparency. HR is not your friend. While HR can provide support and guidance, their primary responsibility is to the company. This means they may not always act in your best interest, and so be mindful of what you share with them and how. Speaking of how, keep records. And so if you're experiencing or witnessing a toxic work environment, a hostile work environment, it's important to keep records of, emails, who you emailed and things like that. This includes to HR. Though this may be helpful in an investigation, I would also recommend keeping your own form of documentation of when you contacted HR, what they told you, who you spoke with as well. And like I said before, whether you're in a toxic work environment or a hostile work environment, it's always good to have conversations about what you're going through with folks outside of that organizational bubble. So again, I would recommend having a trusted family member, a friend, colleague, lawyer, whoever you seek out to have a conversation about what you're experiencing, because I've been that third party for a lot of people. And I can tell you, there are some times where their HR department will be telling them one thing, and I'm like, that is not right. That's weird. Don't do that. You should probably talk to a lawyer. I provide that advice based on me being an HR professional. And so get out of that bubble. So the last thing I want to recognize is I understand that in Layla's story, she quit her job. It's important to recognize that many people may not have that privilege to simply walk away from a hostile work environment or a toxic work environment, because for some people, leaving a job is not an option. This could be financial difficulties that might bring up, lack of job opportunities in the market. You might be in a very niche field or something, immigration restrictions. Things can be really tough and unfair. But ultimately, I hope this video was helpful, because if you're dealing with a toxic workplace or a hostile work environment, know that you're not alone. It's important to take action and speak up about what's going on. So whether it's keeping records, seeking support, reaching out to HR, reaching out to family, friends, whatever it might be, do know there are steps that you can take to protect yourself and others. We all deserve to work in a respectful and safe environment. And by following these tips, I hope that you can make this a reality for you. Thanks for watching or listening, and be sure to check out our other videos on navigating the workplace. I'm Dr. Kevin Sansberry, signing out.